questions for you. So welcome everybody. My name is Sam Renaut. I am hosting our 4th episode of Sports Shorts. I'm joined by Bobby Hacker, who is probably very well known to most of you as I believe you're the outgoing president of SLA at this point, right?
Yeah, a few more months. My term runs to the end of the conference in May.
Perfect. And tell us a little bit about your specific background on why you were eligible on the broadcast rights industry.
Well, from 1998 to 2016, I worked for Fox Sports, working on national programming. So during that time, I worked on everything from the broadcast rights deals for the NFL, Major League Baseball, NASCAR, back in the day when they had the BCS, Cotton Bowl, those kinds of things, plus all of the talent, production, had some labor and employment responsibility, ran the Fox Sports music department for 2 years. So pretty much everything that touches on what you see on your TV screen has a contract behind it, and I did all those contracts.
Understood. So you are the best person to be talking to right now as the NFL gears up for a whole bunch of renewals. It sounds like you're going to have some really good insight as to what they're looking for, what both sides are going to try to get out of this, and how different broadcast deals are going to look here moving forward. So if we can set the stage a little bit, just to paint the picture for people who don't follow this as closely, NFL's deals are all coming up in the next, 12 months, right? Somewhere in that range.
Yeah, they're all expiring now by the end of this next season.
And to give people a glimpse of the value of these deals and what they might look like next. So we have, just for Thursday nights, that's about a $700 million deal between Fox and Amazon. Is that right?
Something like that. I think it might actually be more. I think Fox's share was closer to, the 700 million number. Amazon was incremental. I'm not exactly sure what that number is, but it's a big number.
Close to it. Monday nights are worth about $2 billion to ESPN. Sunday nights are worth about $1 billion to NBC, and then CBS, Fox, and DirecTV split up Sunday afternoons for almost $4 billion.
Yep, probably more than $4 billion.
Yeah, so it's big money, and this is what's carrying the NFL and keeping it afloat.
But just to be fair, ESPN's deal is a little different because you can't look at it just in terms of that Monday night game, because as part of their fee, they also have the rights to use a lot of NFL footage and other programming on their platform. So it's not really a true game deal. Fox is more, and CBS are more pure game deals with rights related to pre and post game highlights, and then, that kind of programming, but not so much for their additional programming on their platforms.
Understood. So now as the broadcast rights arena evolves, you mentioned, and part of what we want to talk about today is sort of the last days of linear television. So for the uninitiated, can you talk about what linear television is, what that means, and what's changing?
Linear television is simply what most all of us have grown up with, which is date and time specific. I want to watch football. I go to Fox at 1 p.m. Eastern to watch the NFL. 2 windows for Fox, 2 windows for CBS. NBC has 1 window on Sunday nights. ESPN has 1 window on Monday nights. The floating Thursday package, who knows? But so linear television, as opposed to what's referred to as direct to consumer or over the top, like Netflix is an over the top. So you don't have to wait until Thursday at 8 to watch your show. You just log on to Netflix and you watch. Linear television, you have to know when and where the show is on to watch it. And as we've seen over the past several years, as you've had a combination of cord cutters and younger cord nevers, those that have grown up in a native digital environment, wondering, why do I have to have a subscription? I can get this, even non-pirating, I can get this, and get things I want when I want it. But because of the rules of the NFL, historically, you need a date and time specific place to watch the games, which is pretty much, to my mind's eye, where linear television even exists anymore. That and some technology issues primarily because the broadband pipeline can maybe deliver 5 million concurrent streams. But if you're averaging 30 million people for an NFL game, it's not going to work. So, I've always felt that Amazon, Amazon could buy the league, forget the TV rights. But Amazon doesn't have the wherewithal to distribute the content because you can't own 5 million streams isn't going to get it done. So for today, until we figure out how to expand that broadband pipeline, live sports like the NFL in particular and jewel sports that get huge numbers cannot exist without linear TV.
That's interesting to know. Now, do you think, and we didn't talk about time, is it worth it to invest in increasing the broadband and capacity at this point to be able to capture all those viewers?
Well, I think it seems to be where it's going. And, you might be the proprietor of a linear TV station and saying, what a dumb idea. It'll never be as good as over the air signal, the cable signal, whatever. But, that's a model that's trying to hold on to relevancy. I think in younger viewers, if you look at demographics, how many younger viewers are watching sitcoms on CBS? I think, and one of the things that you don't realize, and we can get into this when we talk about valuation, is by having, like the NFL, for example, the highest rated program in any day part, by having that, part of your calculus and your rights fee is the promotional value, because the NFL allows you a certain amount of time to promote your own network. And that allows you to have the biggest audience to say, hey, if you come here Tuesday nights at 8, you can watch this, or as you'll see the announcements, or watch it on our digital all access. So I think it's clear that, it's not just hedging bets when so many of the linear channels have, an on-demand service. I think they're seeing they have to be prepared to make that transition. And that's been true for 10 years. I think that the way in which technology has changed for the delivery of content, it was inevitable that, people want it when they want it. Now, I don't think live sports is going to be live sports, and that's a whole separate ballgame. Do people record the game and watch it later? Yes. Do we all have friends who, if you call them, don't say anything? Seriously? That exists, but I think most of us, that date and time is a marker for us. Oh, it's Sunday morning at 10, got to go watch the Rams game, got to go watch the Panthers game, got to go watch the whatever game. So I think that's sort of important, and that makes it kind of special. And for the broadcast, it's special because look at the audience numbers. And if you get all upset and people say, well, the viewership is declining. Well, midterm elections, viewership declined in 2018. A lot of noise out there. 2019, big tick up. 2020, you had pandemic and a major presidential election. Ratings were a little down, not like they were in the midterms. And as we get back, hopefully, to normalcy by this fall, let's all cross our fingers, chant, do whatever else you want to do, light candles, I don't care. And we get back to normalcy, I think you're going to have, good, solid ratings. And I think the NFL is thinking exactly that.
Was it intentional of the NFL to have all their deals expire right around the same time? Was that planned?
Yeah, they've always been concurrent.
So you mentioned, and I want to get a little more tactical if you're able to, on the valuation of these deals. What factors in? I mean, you've mentioned a few things, but how are you really coming up with a dollar figure to value these deals?
Well, you sort of look and you say, what are my income streams? And you say, okay, in the NFL, you're allowed a specific number of commercials. Unlike other sports, the NFL caps the number of commercials you can have. And then they have some add-ons for, if it goes into overtime, and then there's what are called floater units, so that if there's an extra break, they're not guaranteed when you sell them, but it may get more income. So you say, all right, how many units do I have? What's the rate that I'm going to get? How much money do I have coming in? You're going to look at what are you getting in subscription fees from the MVPDs, from the satellite and cable companies. So you're going to look at all of that money coming in. You're going to see what's the revenue that you're making from the stations that are affiliated with you, because under, FCC guidelines, you can only own so many stations. So Fox can only own a limited number of stations, CBS can only own. So they have affiliation agreements with all of these other local stations, and they're getting fees out of those. And when Rupert launched Fox Sports and got the NFL deal, he realized he was a mini network, and the only way that he was going to make it into the big leagues was to get those NFL rights, which he grossly overpaid for, which in today's dollars is a bargain. So because of that, all of a sudden, more stations wanted to be affiliated with the Fox network because they had the highest rated programming in a day part. So that allows you to collect more money from your affiliates. So you've got those income streams. And then you look at what I've always called sort of the fuzzy money number, which is your promotional load. So if in the NFL, and they're still at, I think, 5 minutes a game, and that's 10 commercial units. And if a commercial unit sells at $500,000, probably a little more these days, you're looking at a pretty big chunk. That's, $5 million a game over 100 games. Now you got $500 million a year that you're not really getting in money, but you're getting in value. So you throw all of that into the hopper and you say, can we make money on this? And you do a calculation saying, okay, if it's a 9-year deal, I'm going to get 3 Super Bowls. And in a Super Bowl, I make this much money. So it's long range projections to sort of look at it. And when I was at Fox and we did the deal in 2012, and the average fee went from 700 and something to about 1.1 billion. And I was like, whoa. We were all like sitting there shaking, going, what? I'm not going to be surprised if, the NFL gets 100% increases. And part of that calculus is not so much that, can the network, which is going to be an interesting poker game, because can the networks justify it? Is the ad load going to be enough that they can make the money that they need to at least break even or get close? But I think the NFL has to know that having that promotional platform is of tremendous value to maintaining the relevance of all their entertainment programming. The question then becomes, if the NFL's, some may call it greed, some may call it business stylings, if they push, might some networks say, no, we're not doing it? So if it's, if any of the 3 networks, who doesn't have the rights to a big package? NBC, is NBC going to be willing to do it and take over a Sunday package? I don't know. I mean, and if the others bail out, what do you have left? Turner? So it's a real interesting game. And I don't think anybody wants to get out of it, because regardless, you have the highest rated program in whether it's on Sundays or a primetime window on Sunday or Monday. These are, very important factors for promoting the rest of your platform, where you get an audience that might not be available. So
I think you sort of answered my question already. The next thing I was going to ask was, if anybody has bargaining power, who is it? I think it's the NFL, knowing that they're the most watched show on television.
Yeah, I mean, they're the 800 billion pound gorilla in the room, because you walk in and you say, hi there, we have the highest rated programming in any day part. The NFC package is it, followed by the AFC. And then you get the big primetime windows on, Sunday, Monday, and Thursday's been, very successful, but it's a very expensive cost per game. And again, everybody's, the way the scheduling works, and hats off to Howard Katz and Kathy Yancey and the people at the NFL that get this program and coordinate it and work with it, because it's unbelievable. Because you have to imagine this puzzle. and I don't know, I didn't want to talk about the 17th game that they're talking about now that may happen this season. But in a 16-game season, you have to play everybody in your own division twice, right? So you got 6 games. And then you're playing the other teams, and then you play one of the opposite conferences divisions. And then I think it's every 4 years you end up playing every team in the entire league. So they have to figure this out and where you're going to slot. And then, 10 or so years ago when they came up with the flex scheduling thing so that they could take, move games around. And, you have programming guys sitting there. I don't know what it is now, but it used to be, I think, in week 4 or week 5, and say, well, in week 16, we want to protect this game. Well, traditionally, if you're the NFC, you're protecting Cowboys, the Washington Football Club. See, I got it caught myself. And that was always a great game. But, when you have 2, 4 and 10 teams playing each other in week 16, and that's the game you've protected, and some other, it's difficult, but the NFL is the one in control of the bargaining, notwithstanding the fact that they're drawing down, 8 or 10 billion a year in rights fees.
I want to go to another thing you mentioned before, that there's a limit on the number of stations you can run. Does that extend to digital broadcasts as well?
No, it's an FCC thing, which is just over the air, an ancient expression that you can only own so many stations. I forget what the number is, 20 something, 30 something, something like that. So but example, on the Fox network and CBS, it's over 200 stations.
So who's coming into this? I mean, you touched on this a little bit as well. You've got the major players who are now, and they may renew. It seems like they'd have a lot of interest in doing so. Who's going to be new to the party, do you think?
I don't think there is a new player. I think the new player is how much the NFL is going to be able to convince the broadcast partners to allow what's happened on Thursday nights primarily and in a couple one-off experiences, and let Amazon in the game. I mean, years ago, I was doing a podcast with Sean Cottrell at Law and Sport out of the UK. And I said, when the next deal comes up, referencing this deal that we're in now, watch out for Amazon. And the only thing I think that's keeping Amazon out of the game is the pipeline. Because if I'm Amazon and I'm spending billions of dollars on programming, and I'm building this crazy vertical enterprise, I would love to have the NFL, because I could promote all of this robust programming I have, all of this stuff. And what better way to introduce people to all of these shows than when you get, 30 million eyeballs on a Sunday watching. So that's interesting. And from a network perspective, what am I going to say? Sure, Amazon can have a digital distribution through its channels, but I don't want them promoting Amazon programming while I'm promoting my programming. You're sort of bastardizing my valuation. And as with any deal, the word that everybody wants that drives the most value is exclusivity. And if you start parsing that exclusivity up, how does that decrease the value? And I'm sure that there are people saying, well, if Amazon gets it, it can't be worth as much. And having been around the block with the NFL a few times, I think that they're pretty much saying, yeah, we hear you, but so what? And it's about getting your audience, because if I'm a cord never and I'm not capable of watching the NFL wants those younger audience members, because the age skews very high for NFL. So the NFL wants clearly to get those people that grew up in a native digital environment that want to access as they've accessed all their other content. But how do you do that without, slapping those that have changed the face of the National Football League, the broadcast partners?
What happens with, this is my own novice question, when there are regional blackouts, how does that work from the broadcast perspective and from a fan's perspective, even more importantly? Like, how do I know where I can find my game if it is being blacked out?
Oh, well,
We didn't prep on this either, so feel free to
no.
punch.
It's an interesting thing. So if you're a home market like Los Angeles has to show a Rams game and a Chargers game. So if let's say the Chargers were 2-15, and at the same time as the Chargers game was on, there was, Kansas City, New England for the number 1 seed in the playoffs. LA still gets the Chargers because you have to deliver to the home market. And then they used to have the blackout rules, which fortunately were gone, which would say that, for example, if the Rams were in LA and the Rams didn't sell out, not only would you not see the Rams game, but they wouldn't put any other game into that market. It was an old concept that you had to protect ticket sales. Well, when you're collecting $8 or $10 billion in rights fees and every team is getting $330 million or whatever they get from the league, from the TV rights, it's a disingenuous argument to make, which is why that whole blackout rule got lifted. But, when it's called mapping, the research people at the networks, they're deciding what's going to get the best rating in a market. And so, you live in Charlotte, so Panthers. I mean, you don't have a choice. But for somebody who lives, let's say, in Arkansas, where there's no NFL team, they're going to say first choice is going to be, well, is there an affinity with one of the NFL teams somewhere? Is it maybe the Titans that would be the closest team? So are they getting the Titans games? Or does it make more sense to give them the Bears game? And that's a decision that's made from the network people.
Got it. So as we think about these new deals, other than the obvious where there's very likely going to be some digital streaming plays coming into them, what other creative pieces do you think either the networks or the league is going to try to work into this deal that we don't currently see?
Well, I think one of the questions that I think would be asked would be about this Verizon mobile deal that the NFL has had forever. In 2011, maybe, negotiating the throes of the last deal, or maybe it was even earlier, sitting there, and which isn't that long ago. We're talking less than 10 years ago. And I was involved in spending over an hour just talking about what is a telephone. Because at the time I had my iPad 2, brand new iPad 2, and I said, I have a program on here called Tango that allows me to use my iPad as a telephone. So is my iPad now a telephone? And then they said, well, no, it's something that's this big by this big. And then I go, well, there's a new Galaxy phone that Samsung is making that's bigger. So is that no longer a phone? It's always seemed to me, in the argument that I've always tried to make, and I think is one that makes sense, is that if I'm paying to a cable company, satellite company, or whatever, I'm paying and I get an authenticated signal, it doesn't much matter where I view that. I should be able to view that on any device wherever I am, because I pay Spectrum too much money and I get a signal and I can log onto that account, and I should be able to, I can get it on my phone, my tablet, my computer, or that thing that hangs on my wall. Now, I am a proponent that television is a noun describing a device on which you watch content, because the old concept of television doesn't really make sense anymore. And that's why, it sounds a little geeky, but I refer to content because that's what it is. And it's how do you get it? Where do you get it? And what's the NFL going to allow? Because you have to remember, at the very beginning, when dinosaurs ruled the earth, all of these deals were very specific. Fox, CBS, NBC had the right to a live one-time broadcast over the air. Well, since we flipped the digital switch and got rid of analog, Is there such a thing as over the air? Well, you can have a digital rabbit ear antenna at home to pull down that signal, but that market is minuscule. It's barely existing. But you know, over the air, because part of over the air used to be when these deals first got done, people had antennas, you picked up the signal through the airwaves, and then you watched it on TV. Then as the growth of the MVPDs came about, you know, as lawyers, you only had the right to take the signal and distribute it. So then you had to get retransmission consent so that you could essentially sublicense your deals to the MVPDs, which is where we are today. So the next logical step is to try to get couch rights, which is to say, if I'm here in you know, the LA area and I have a deal with an MVPD, if I'm in New York, I should be able to access that content. The NFL has historically said, no, we have to protect that market, which when you think about it, makes no sense. I mean, I'm paying to see what I'm going to see when I'm in LA on my devices. Why shouldn't I still get that? So that's one of the changes. They may ask for an opening up of some of the rights. And they may ask for the ability to be able to stream over their own services as well, which I think makes a lot of sense.
It does. I like the idea of the couch rights. I hadn't thought about it in that phrasing, but that makes a lot of sense. Final question, be predictive here. How big is the next deal going to be? What's our increase?
Well, I got to say, I was originally thinking that it would be, you know, a year ago, I thought 50% would be absurd, right? But they had that huge 2019. And, you know, people are going to say, oh, the Super Bowl, look at it, look, the worst rating since 2006 or whatever. It's really hard to use that as your barometer. It was just a weird time. And, you know, the pageantry and the excitement of the game wasn't there. You know, having fans, you know, I represent broadcasters and I'm friends with a lot of broadcasters, and all of them to a person said the same thing before the season started, how tough it was going to be to not have fans in a stadium, because that is another element to telling the story. And if you just had announcers sitting there, you know, play by play, and an analyst without the ability to talk about how the crowd is getting into it, or when they do the Lambeau leap, those kinds of things taken away, that's a lot of space for just, you let the pictures tell the story, and you don't rely on the analysts to have to find words, and analysts concerned about, am I talking too much, and so on and so forth. So I think once we return to normalcy, which I think we expect by this fall to a greater extent, I think your audience is going to be there, and I think there's going to be excitement to see people in the stands, and I think people will want to get back. Will we be at 100% capacity in the fall? I wouldn't bet on it, but even with all of that, people, look, it only got 92.6 million people. Let's pause. 92.6 million people. All right. It's the highest rated program of the year. So if you stop worrying about the rating is less than it was the year before, and you look at it in terms of relative statements, namely, it's still the highest rated program, it's still a top 10 program in a marketplace of, you know, in 1961, when Pete Rozelle was able to combine all the rights and do everything, and, you know, the three networks controlled 85% of everything. You know, you basically had three national channels, and then everybody had a couple local channels, and maybe one, what we used to call educational channel. Now you're dealing with hundreds and hundreds of potential platforms on which to get your content. So I still think it's a good play, and my 50% is conservative, and I wouldn't be surprised at a 75 to 100% increase in the rights fees. Shocking though it may be.
That's well said. I mean, even amongst the losses that a lot of sponsors took, I think I agree with you. I think it's going to be at least 50%. So Appreciate all the wisdom and insight. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will wrap now for everyone who attended. We appreciate your time, and we will see you all again in 2 weeks.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks a lot, Bobby.
Oh, and don't forget to register to join the SLA, sla.org. Renew your membership now.
There you go. Full plug. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.